Now, joining me once again is Andy McCarroll. This time we are going to count down the Wheel of Movies top 5 serial flicks. And in at number 5, you got very greedy, Andy, because you put 2 in at number 5. We've got Mr Brooks and Frailty. Let's begin with Frailty, directed by Bill Paxton, and the film stars Matthew McConaughey. I forgot Matthew McConaughey was even in it.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey and Joseph Fiennes, Ray Fiennes' brother, play a pair of brothers whose father is accused of being a serial killer. He says that, but the people he's killing are demons. And the reason I kind of picked is, like everything else on the list is something I'd say most of the audience has seen before, but I picked this because I think this is a real underrated gem. People like James Cameron and Stephen King had this as their film of the year in 2003 when it came out. It's an absolute gem of a film, and I don't want to give too much away about the story. If you've got Matthew McConaughey, you've got Bill Paxton, I think for listeners of the show that should sell you enough. It's just a really clever, smart kind of serial killer thriller. The kind of film they don't really make films like this anymore. It's kind of, we've talked previously about the kind of the disappearance of the mid-budget film, and I think this is a prime example of that. Like, we're losing out on just great little one-off stories like this where you don't have to build a shared universe or a franchise or a sequel to that. Absolutely check it out if you haven't seen it before. I don't think you'd be disappointed.
All right, ringing endorsement there from Andy. And Andy, sharing the number 5 slot is Mr Brooks. Kevin Costner stars in this film as the serial killer in question. Why should people watch this one, though?
Again, this is kind of one of those ones that have flown under the radar. This is kind of at the height of Kevin Costner making his straight-to-video try. This one he plays, Kevin Costner is kind of the good slice Americana, apple pie. Here he plays, a psychotic serial killer who gets caught in the act one night by Dane Cook, of all people, who agrees not to tell the police on him, but he has to take him along on his next murder. It's really, really clever. It's a very, very smart film. Kevin Costner actually called it the best script he's ever read, and if you think, the films he's made, that's high praise indeed. Again, another kind of under-the-radar gem. I'm saying that you did think The Postman and Waterworld were good, so I don't know how much you can take his endorsement for it. But again, a kind of a clever, under-the-radar film. If you haven't seen it, I think definitely worth checking out. All
right, Andy, let's move on to number 4 in your list, American Psycho. American Psycho, Andy, I think this is a film that helped Christian Bale. It sort of reignited his career.
Yeah, I think this was the kind of most people's introduction to him, and it's, he really fought hard. Like, he was cast initially when it was going to be this kind of low-budget film. Leonardo DiCaprio then took an interest in it, so he was booted off the film. And kind of in a strange twist of fate as well, there was the book. If anyone's read the book, it's absolutely gruesome. And there was a writer in the LA Times called Gloria who wrote scathing attack. This book is like an attack on feminism. Absolutely did not want DiCaprio to take. It was like a kind of a letter to DiCaprio, an open letter to DiCaprio to tell him not to take the role. And in a weird twist of fate, then she ended up marrying David Bale, who's Christian Bale's father, who ended up playing the main role, Patrick Bateman, in the film. So the film has this kind of weird, what suits the story of the film. Is it real? Is it not? That kind of hyper madness that it seems to exist on and off the screen when it comes to this film.
And that's one of the things about the ending. You will be debating it long after, which we of course will not get into now. For those that have not seen American Psycho, do check it out. We move on now to a film which, when it came out, it set the box office alight. People were so taken aback by it. Directed by David Fincher. A lot of people feel his film career started with Seven as opposed to Alien 3. But again, great cast in this. A fantastic script from Andrew Kevin Walker, Andy.
Yeah, he wrote it working in Tower Records because he was so depressed. So, there's some good from working in record shops, apparently. Like you said, the cast is absolutely fantastic. You have Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, Kevin Spacey, Robert Lee Ermey. And what you said is this kind of has the reputation as being this kind of gory, sick serial killer film. There's no murders in the film up until, literally the last scene in the movie, which if you haven't seen, I'm not going to give away. And even that as well, a lot of people have thought, oh yeah, we've seen, not to get too much in the end, and there is a kind of a gruesome moment in the end, which you don't actually see. It's one of those, Mandela effect moments where you think you've seen it, but you actually haven't, because the tension is ramped up so well in that final scene that you end up seeing things. It's kind of that fear of the unknown plays on your mind as opposed to actually what you're seeing on screen.
Yeah, it's very true. What's in the box? All right, let's move on to number 2 in your list, Andy. Again from David Fincher. This is just, I think, one of his best films, and I think it's one of his most underrated films, Zodiac.
Yeah, it's kind of like a serial killer film without the serial killer. And the case of the Zodiac famously was never caught, so you're kind of hamstrung from that point that you don't have the big reveal of the killer. It does have a moment like that where it suggests who it is, but you don't actually have, like you had with Kevin Spacey, a memorable serial killer who comes up and is able to monologue and justify why all these things are happening. And I think something that we talked earlier about with Seven, it's that fear of the unknown. Because he wasn't caught, any one of these characters could be the killer. And it's got absolutely fantastic performances. You've got Jake Gyllenhaal, you've Mark Ruffalo, Robert Downey Jr. as well. And kind of a weird tidbit of trivia in that the reason that Mark Ruffalo and Jake Gyllenhaal got cast was actually based on recommendations from Jennifer Aniston, who was married to Brad Pitt at the time. He was one of the producers on the film. So we have Jennifer Aniston to thank for such a great cast in Zodiac.
Who would have thunk it, Andy? And Andy, the number one film in our top 5 serial killer flicks is
Silence of the Lambs, I think, to the surprise of nobody. Features, two of the best performances in any thriller or horror, any film ever, really, full stop. Hannibal Lecter is just an absolute icon of cinema. He's just one of the most memorable characters of all time. And I think Jodie Foster as Clarice, it could very easily have been overpowered. And especially you see a lot of, a female person going up against, a big, overpowering, like scenery-chewing villain. It's very easy for them to just kind of fall into the background and just be motivated by the story of the villain. But Jodie Foster absolutely more than holds her own in this film. She is absolutely incredible in this film. And again, another one of these strange kind of what-if casting moments was actually Michelle Pfeiffer was offered the film initially. She said no, she just couldn't get on board with the gruesome nature of the film. Gene Hackman had the rights to the book for years, and he was looking at directing and starring as Lecter himself. Sean Connery was offered the film. He said no, he thought it was absolutely disgusting. Daniel Day-Lewis was in talks at one point. Thankfully, it ended up at the door of Anthony Hopkins eventually, because when you watch him in that, and even in the Red Dragon and Hannibal, which aren't as anywhere near as good as Silence of the Lambs, he absolutely embodies that character. He is absolutely perfect. He's not physically intimidating. It's intelligence that makes him as sinister and as frightening as he really is, because you just feel like he could talk you into any situation that you end up in a dinner party with your head open.
Listen, Andy, sounds like you could be easily persuaded by him. But people might say, a bit of Brian Cox, though, a Manhunter.
I think that's kind of the real kind of indie hipster way of saying, like, Brian Cox he's good in the film, but he doesn't have a particularly memorable moment in that film. He's very much confined for the whole duration. He doesn't have the big set piece escape that Lecter has. He doesn't have a lot of the memorable lines. Sure. I think that's one of those, I'm saying he's better, just like saying Alden Ehrenreich is the best Han Solo, just to be different.
Very good. Well, listen, Andy, thank you so much for going through your top 5 serial killer flicks.
And that's the end of that chapter.